Hello and welcome to Tuesday and Masters, and we are going to delve deep into positional sacrifices. It's going to be a dear opening, at least dear to my heart, because there are many misconceptions and rumors spread that are wrong. On the other hand, a warm welcome to everyone here in this cold night. Hopefully everyone stays warm wherever you are, hopefully at home or here. In either case, be warm, because frostbite ain't no fun. Anyways, let's dig in. This first game is between Adhiban and Kovalenko. Now, Adhiban is sort of one of the first new waves of Indian players. There's actually a lot of great Indian players you actually get to know. There is, of course, Shashikiran and, of course, Hare Krishna among the legendary ones after Vishayanand. Now, they never really got as much media attention, but hopefully Hare Krishna can show his true mettle at this Total Steel tournament. But back to our game between Adhiban and Kovalenko. D4, C4, here we're gonna breeze through, and D5. Everybody knows about this position for the wrong reasons. This actually is an incredibly famous pawn sacrifice that AI kind of claimed that, we found this magnificent idea. Not so. Lev Polugayevsky came up with this pawn sacrifice in the 80s. We're not going to look at his games. If you have the time, or if I'll have the time, I probably will review, or you can review it yourself. This pawn sacrifice is actually fairly interesting because it's going to be just smack dab in the middle of our topic, and this one's really about positional pawn sacrifices. Now, D5, at first glance, doesn't look too bad because it actually gives up a pawn, but it does something very important. It disrupts Black's play. Now, if it would be Black's turn, Black actually would heavily consider moving the pawn to D5. So this pawn sacrifice is positional for a couple of reasons. It's positional because there is no raging attack, there's no checkmate in sight. You are giving up a pawn, but for strategic compensation. Now, by the way, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and of course, I'll have questions of my own. So D5, not only does it take away Black's play, it also buries the bishop on B7. So this D5 idea is actually quite a genius move. White is giving up a pawn for crippling Black's pieces, practically crippling Black's play. E takes D5. Okay, so some of you might have seen this because AIs have been playing this position like it's their invention. Again, it's Polugayevsky who invented it. Other machines borrowed it. But let's try to figure it out on our own. So if we just capture back, we sort of defeat the purpose of the pawn sacrifice. In that case, the bishop comes alive and a pawn is still a pawn. So I'm not propagating you sacrifice a pawn. You should always sacrifice a pawn for a reason. So if you already know that this bishop is sort of the heart and soul of the position, how can we play against it? What do y'all think back at home and over here at the club? How can we exert more pressure? Because oftentimes positional pawn sacrifices are all about added pressure, as you'll see in these games.
Get the knight out of the way of the bishop.
This one? This pony?
Yep.
Where do you want to put it?
That's the question.
That's a good question. That's why I'm asking it. But I like it. I like the gist of the idea. Oftentimes, if you don't know, go with your hunch. D4. That's very good. Now, interestingly enough, White's position is promising, and the reason it's so promising because he even has options. The knight can go here and can go here. Now in the game, went h4, but knight d4, of course, is just as good. In fact, if you are playing this game, I would actually advise you to go towards the center. Now, the reason why it doesn't really matter, because the knight is heading to a juicy spot, and that's knight to f5.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out, because like c5 still is kind of annoying for White's knight.
So c5, yes, that's definitely an idea. But of course the knight wanted to go here anyways.
That's what I was trying to see.
Now, just based on the structure, there is this feeling, once you play chess long enough, that black may just build this long pawn structure. But that's impossible because I have so much pressure on your bishop. Now, if you move the knight here, I do capture the pawn because they release the tension. And this is like a strategic victory for White. The bishop is dead. White has a center pawn. What is there not to like for White? Already in this position, White has 3 attackers, only 2 defenders. Remember, whenever you're on the attack, you have to outnumber the defenders. And we have that. So c5 here is actually not such a big problem. Black actually has to play this very ugly little move, but ugly little ducklings can turn into beauties. For now it looks ugly, but there is a point. It defends the pawn. Now, in the game, knight h4 was played, but it's going to transpose. It's going to be the same thing. Black does c6. So there is one thing, and one thing that we gotta add before we go deeper. Sometimes, whenever they sacrifice a pawn for you, should you take it or should you refuse it?
It depends.
Most of the time you want to accept it. Why? Well, that's the only way you can find out if you can punish it. If you refuse it, there's 0 chance you'll be able to capitalize on it. Now, of course, the cop-out answer of it depends is not bad, but for example, if you have like a huge advantage, of course you don't have to take an extra pawn if you're up a knight. Why? You're already winning. You do whatever you have to do. Yes?
Just the one that comes to mind. Is it Albin? Is that the name? Albin?
Mm-hmm. Albin, yeah. Or Banco, yeah.
Sometimes I like to play e3. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, I know
Mm-hmm.
so you want me to take so badly. Yeah.
So-
yeah. So no, I'm not
Uh-huh.
doing it.
So,
And I've noticed that e3 in that position, sometimes I'm not giving them what they
Mm-hmm.
want. Yes.
well, sure. Obviously, you do you play the style which you prefer, but if you want to get the maximum out of the position and you feel your opponent is just giving you a gift, who are you to refuse? Now black goes by that same sentiment. They gave them a pawn. Who are they to refuse? So takes, knight takes d5. Now if pawn takes, this is again a moral victory. If black decides to take with the pawn, even though completely legitimate, black's bishop is still really bad. And this doubled pawn, its true real value is, of course, one single pawn. So in fact, black technically is up a pawn, but in reality it's worth just a single pawn. So black actually is behind a good bishop. So black should take knight f5, knight c7, e4. Now, once you play gambit style, and once you give up a pawn, you actually have to start rolling with your pieces. You really have to show something for the sacrificed pawn. Now what white does, first off, he plants a knight on f5, which is actually putting a lot of pressure and sort of inching closer to the king. But again, look at this. Even though we're down a pawn, look at that garage sale over there on the queen side. That's a bit unseemly, right?
Yeah.
That bishop is terrible. That rook in the corner cannot move. And these pieces are sort of tripping on one another. So black does what he can do and just goes for d5. Knight c3, bishop f6. Now, a big question here. Should black take this pawn? Now, you don't necessarily have to give me a reason how it's refuted, but if you can actually reason why you think it's good or bad, that'd be appreciated.
I think it might be in black's interest, perhaps, to trade queens in this position, and that at least increases the probability that will happen. It doesn't have to occur.
So, one of the key things in chess is to count. If you're bad counting on your hands, chess is not for you. But if you pass that test, chess is a fun game. Now, yes, you got more stuff. So trade should be beneficial, right? However, there's another thing you gotta take a look at whenever you think of trading. And I'm talking about the basics, the basic foundation of chess. There's the opening phase, you develop your pieces, and then, in order to checkmate, what type of pieces you need to involve.
As many as I can.
Well, light pieces, heavier one. Oh, go ahead.
You gotta get the rooks in there.
You gotta get them rooks and then queens in there to win, right? How many moves will it take white to do that? Well, 1, 2, 3, right? How many does it take for this rook to get out? 1,000,000. That's right, 1,000,000,000, gazillion, 1,000,000. A 1, a 2, 3, 4, and it's still something to be said about the king being a little unsafe. So time is not on black's side. So black actually needs to either defend, it's not the move, bishop f6, defend, which he did, or get the knight out somehow. If you take here, whenever you trade, and I think this is not quite clear, and it's not actually told quite enough. Whenever you trade, you don't develop a piece, you don't do anything. You don't improve your king's safety either. trading really means my position is A, so good that trading is fine. B, trading is good because I will have to suffer less. But in fact, trading is more of a conclusion of the position. It's a liquidation. You're actually cashing out. Black, in fact, is not quite ready to cash out. He's trying to avoid the trades because he's so behind.
I see.
And I think this is super important. You shouldn't trade the first time you get the chance. There are these first steps you gotta do before you get there. So it is still bishop f6. Bishop f6, he takes, and notice that white actually is the one trading because he's like, oh, you're way behind, you're not ready for confrontation. I am, so trades are actually valuable for me. So knight takes, rook e1. Rooks belong on the open file. Knight a6. Okay, so for now the situation has clarified. Black got their pieces out, not an ideal spot, mind you. The knight isn't supposed to be there. The bishop is still pretty bad. It's stuck behind the pawn while we have pressure on that pawn. So it's more of a target than a strength. And as we said before, black's pieces are still all over the place. Okay, so knowing all that, what moves would come to your mind? And these are sort of the critical moments because this is when white can act. This is the moment white can actually exert more pressure.
Queen g4.
Queen g4 is very nice. Very aggressive move, immediately hitting the king. It's a very good move. It's not a move that they play, but I like it. It's aggressive, and it's also justified. Whenever you go make aggressive moves, make sure your queen isn't on a solo mission. The lady needs her helpers. But don't forget, and this is one of those prime things that I always come back to. We talk about those principles, follow them. Yes, where would you want to put that bishop?
To e3.
Okay. That's good. Controls that square. However, what if you thought about this knight and thinking, how can I support that knight with my bishop? So I would just add an extra square that this knight can occupy.
Bishop h6.
No.
Well, the pawn would eat the bishop. This is not a bullet arena, sir.
I thought you were talking about maybe sacrificing the bishop.
Bishop to f4.
Bishop f4, very good. So, unlike pickup games where anything flows, here your moves have to have a purpose. You can't just squeeze and cheese your way into a scholar's mate. This is real chess. So bishop f4, you have that d6 square now. Bishop takes b2. Now, black takes the pawn, but it's kind of risky. So rook b1, bishop f6. Why? Because, funnily enough, pawn captures and trades are the same genre. They don't actually add to your position. You kind of subtract something from your opponent's game, but it doesn't improve your pieces. And that's something that's actually not pinpointed, but it's very important and actually crucial. So takes, b1, bishop f6. So black is again, in some sense, sacrificing time for the second pawn. And there are times when you can actually say, well, greed, be careful with your greed. Because you want to get your pieces out and then be greedy. That is possible. All that said, Kovalenko is confident and the position is still tense. Black has pawns, but white has a lot of development. So we gave up 2 pawns. Now if nothing happens and our opponent doesn't flag for no reason in a 2-hour-long game, we'll have to find some aggressive moves. I think we can do it. So this is actually still more of a strategic play by white because there's no checkmate as of yet. We're just putting pressure on black's terrible pieces, and that should be our goal. Having bad memories taking B pawns, don't we all? We all have bad memories of that. Now, especially when you're attacking, being consequential with your play is crucial. Because any move wasted, it's time lost for your attack. So what are the key pieces that we think might be the main problem issue for black? Yeah, this is great, but I mean for the black side, what are the bad pieces?
Oh, for black.
Yes, for black.
The bishop on b7.
This is terrible. This is terrible. Now, as we're putting positional pressure on black's play and black's position, what would be the most logical way of attacking any of that? The knight or the bishop.
Bring the rook up to b5.
Well, if you go to b5, you hit the pawn, right? But actually, we're trying to expose these guys.
I would say knight d6.
Knight d6 indeed. And by the way, rook b5 would be a good move in a normal situation, but we're already down 2 pawns. So even if we win 1 pawn back, it's not going to help us. Now, of course, if you have no deficit, go after as many pawns as you can. But here, time is not on our side. Knight d6, and we are putting pressure on that bishop. Look at how fast black will crumble if I just make the most simple but insipid queen d7. Then I just take here. Oh, the bishop is gone. Oh, sciorino. You lose the rook, you lost the pawn, you lose the game. Just take the rook, and you're losing. Also, you have a terrible knight, apart from losing. So it's probably -2. So you might be wondering, okay, wait a second. So they have a bad piece, and they still have to take care of the bad piece. Because if you don't, then it will cease to actually defend a critical square, and there won't be a counterpart for the bishop on g2. So it goes bishop c6, and now this move will be somewhat surprising. However, after you got your pieces on him, white has all of his pieces ready to fire away. Rooks are on open files. However, never forget the 4 golden squares. That's what we fight for. That's what all the battle is for, especially here on Middle Earth. the 4 key squares in the board. So this time we actually do take. Why? Because, yes, our opponent actually eases up because they get to trade the bishop. But we get in turn a center square. And this might confuse you because you're saying, well, aren't we supposed to avoid trades? Yes, but there are squares and there are outposts that are worth it. Remember Garry Kasparov's legendary knight, which was actually on d3 in the famous Karpov-Kasparov game, and the octopus landed. It's the same deal. This is the mirror version of that. This knight is an octopus, puts immense pressure on the pawn, and also denies crucial squares from the rooks. Notice that black can't even make this move, which is tricky. Can't touch this because the queen is hanging. Because queen b7, and I have a double attack. I move away from danger, and my queen comes in like a stranger. I will be able to take back whenever you take there. And I'll be up in exchange and happy. So what white got is a center square, an amazing spot for your queen, dominating the whole board. Dominates everything, literally. And meanwhile, black's pieces are incredibly passive. So whenever we actually mention the idea of passive pieces, you want to combine it with how active your opponent is. White's pieces are actually putting an immense amount of pressure on black's position. It's not that black is mated, black just cannot move, or at least having difficulty moving. But here comes actually the point number 2. Even though black cannot move, black is still up a pawn. Does that mean they have to resign? No, they don't have to resign. Because they're up a pawn, they can still hope. So they do go here. Well, not there. d7, rook d1. You tend to put as much pressure and bring everybody towards the open files. Rook d8, h4, knight c5. And even though black has so little space, so white has the space advantage. White has the critical squares covered. However, our target, this pawn, is hard to reach, right? And also, mostly, we can infiltrate the 7th rank. So white's next move, Adhiban the Beast, his next move is try to find a way to scurry in through the e7 square. How can we unlock that passage for our rooks?
By trading the bishops.
Where would you put your bishop?
Trying to figure out. I just instinctively, I would probably go for g5.
Very good.
Because my rook's on the open file.
Yep, your rook is on the open file. You've been thinking either here or there. But in general, also look at how consequential Adhiban's play is. Goes h4, and then actually follows up with an idea connected to that pawn push. And that's actually what top players do. They make sure that a move that they played aren't just a move that just lingers there for no purpose at all. They want to use it for their upcoming turns. They're building on their position. So it goes bishop g5. Takes on g5. H takes. And here Kovalenko had enough of suffering. And in fact, when you are under pressure, you sometimes have to buckle down and try to defend. But he had enough and said, okay, I'm going to play aggressively. Queen a4. Of course, we say thank you for letting us in. Rook d7, rook e1. Notice once you enter the 7th rank, you want to be the most unwelcome visitors. You never want to leave. Because that's the only way you can have your foot in the door. So rook e1, knight b7. And black was probably counting on this idea of knight b7 and saying, ha-ha! Who's trapping who? But he is about to come to beautiful, beautiful idea. Probably a sad awakening for the black player, but a beautiful finish by the white player nonetheless. It seems that black is the one pulling the strings, but this next move actually turns everything upside down. This is why I never castle, always castle. Castling is crucial, especially if you want to get your pieces into the game.
Boros, we're having some connection issues. Stand by for just a moment.
All right, so you go here. Probably will take this guy.
Okay, I think we're back here.
Okay, so
Yeah, we're good.
So that's not it.
well, rook e8. The problem is that I do take your knight. So here's you're sort of going against time. If in fact we are not going to crash through. So let's say rook e8, which is an aggressive move, so you're going in the right direction. The issue is if black survives the attack and manages to actually stop the back rank mate, black will be okay. So your direction is correct, but in fact, the beauty of the situation that the rook is marvelously placed. And what might have shocked black here is that black is actually having some issues, which you actually solve in the first half of all puzzles that throws at you. Here, white comes up with a splendid sacrifice that exposes the king. So where do you want to sacrifice the rook?
F7.
Okay, so rook takes f7. Thing is, they're probably going to take this way. If I take this way, then you actually succeed. It's checkmate. Rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, and unfortunately, the lady comes back from the nightclub just in time to neutralize the unwanted visitor.
Is it can you play G6? I was trying to look at just G6.
G6, I do capture. But again, notice something. Takes, takes, takes. Here, the lady comes back. Notice that square is defended now. Compare it to the current situation.
Do you threaten the lady with the rook?
Which lady?
Black's lady.
So you could threaten, but they actually have a nasty counter trick. Because even if we win the queen, they get ours. And they also snatch the pony along the way. So notice the fact that this queen actually has no access to that square.
In other words, how can we keep the queen from getting to E8?
That's correct. How are you going to keep that lady from controlling that square? So it has to be a classic back rank idea, but it's a different fashion choice by white. Queen takes f7. White parts and bids farewell to Her Majesty. But also Kovalenko realized that this is no good and resigned. Now, of course, this is no question. It's made. Black has to take. So now, what are the finishing touches? You gotta act quick before the queen comes home.
Rook takes on F7.
Well, if you take, the issue is, again, my queen will protect the square.
Son of a bitch. Rook E8. Check.
Rook E8 check. Rook F8. Take, yep.
And then bring the rook up.
And it's mate, yes. Very good. So this is that wonderful, wonderful checkmate, which wouldn't have worked if the queen comes back, but because black's pieces were so misplaced, that's why this tactic flew. And that's actually sort of the point of positional pawn sacrifices and positional sacrifices in general. You are giving up a pawn for a different goal. You're giving up them for the reason so you can misplace those pieces. That being the key idea. Okay, so let's take a look at this beautiful game. I think we can look at this one. Well, let's see, this one. Here, here, here. And we're gonna go same position, same sacrifice, but this time they go knight to e6. Queen d8 was in this game, but this one is Sandipan versus Tiviakov. Black goes knight e6. So it's the same position, same pawn sacrifice. We go into a different critical position and continue from there. Notice that our bishop is dangerously looking, staring at the queen. Now, because black's pieces in this case is a little bit offsides, and we actually already have 3 pieces on this side of the board, we actually have a good chance for a nice attack. Now, whenever you have the majority, we've got a 3 versus 2, 2 defenders versus 3 attackers, the best way to make sure that victory is guaranteed, you move even more pieces over. Now, especially because of the loose nature of black's pieces, white actually, that is Sandipan versus Tiviakov, is going to be able to exploit the fact that that queen is unprotected. So it's white to move. And it's not like a winning move immediately, but it definitely is a jaw-dropping idea for white. So you don't want to go queen a4. You don't want to trade queens. You're down a pawn. That's no good.
What about
Queen g4 is great, obviously. Yeah, it's a very natural move. However, it doesn't really exploit the fact that black is really in a tight spot and pieces are loose. Knight d6 is closer to that, for sure. And in fact, yeah, knight e4 Let's get this party started. Can't touch this because the lady drops. And there's no choice for black but to go knight clubbing to b2. But again, it's not a pawn you want to take. Bishop c8. And this is actually, again, like a very tricky thing in chess. You defend by attacking. So the queen was unprotected. The bishop is unprotected, but there's also this knight hanging. You can't touch this because I take still. But once you went here, takes, I take the knight because I got the defense covered. Now the whole point of knight e4 and captures here wasn't really all about the bishop. Who cares about the bishop? Who cares about the bishop? Not us. We're on a journey.
Swing the knight over to g5.
Very good. Knight g5. Can't touch this. Check. There goes the lady. And that's, again, very good play. You want to make sure you follow through a plan, a game plan. Knight g5. Well, the whole world is in pain. You got to go home. Save everybody. Now you go queen h5. You over-defend this. Big, big threats. Again, can't touch this. You lose the queen. Takes, rook e8. And here black thinks that he's all right. But in fact, he's going to realize that he's in a big world of pain after this move. Knight takes g7 is pretty good, but I can still capture that back, especially with the knight, because your queen is hanging. So knight takes, I capture back. However, notice who are the real contributors for defense in black's position. Well, the knight is a big piece, right? The knight is a big piece. And which one is the other piece that might swing over to defend the king? Her Majesty, the queen. She would love to come over and chit-chat with dear husband. But this beautiful game-stopping move stops that idea.
Put the knight in there.
Where?
To e7.
So if you go knight e7, right now I've got 2 defending and only 2 attacking. Then you lose that fight because they just capture everything. That just wins 2 pieces, and 2 pieces are worth more than a rook. This next move cuts off communication completely. The queen won't be able to swing over. Black actually wants to do some unseemly moves such as f6. You gotta stop him. Bishop f6. Queen can't come over. Takes. Now the whole point is the queen is offsides. We gave up a bishop so the queen can participate. Now, white goes queen h6, and here comes the big question. Are we threatening anything? Not really.
Not until you get rid of the knight.
Well, even if we get rid of the knight, what happens?
Pawn opens up.
Pawn takes. So let's say black makes a move. Takes. Ah, it's not mate.
Big trouble.
Yes.
Wah, wah, wah.
So the knight is the only one guarding that square. However, c5. Can black do anything? Knight can't move. Queen can't move. Can't come closer. Can't come closer. You move the king, I take the pawn. So here comes our final big victorious march towards victory.
You play rook b4? Just try to slide.
Rook b4, I might block you.
Okay.
But you're looking in the right direction. And again, notice, yes, we gave up a pawn, we gave up even a piece, and it's more about paralyzing black's position than about checkmating. Of course, the goal of the game is still checkmate, but you get my point.
Attack the rook. Go, or attack the knight. Knight to d4.
Well, the point, once you have your knight on a great spot,
Leave him there.
you don't want to move from there. So b4, knight e4.
Sorry, I was just going to say, is f3 just too slow? You have to keep rolling this leg.
You don't want to move your pawns if possible.
Take away that.
I understand, but it's also a little slow and you're kind of creating problems for yourself.
Okay.
Because rook b4, b4, knight e4. But remember, just because an idea fails, just because the move fails, rather, the idea may not.
If you do rook b4 and then they block with the knight, can't you just take the knight?
So the thing is, if you do that, go here. The issue is that, yes, you get away for your rook, but you also let me in.
Back rig, yeah. Okay.
But you may as well keep the idea alive. And that might just take away all hopes for black. So if you can't go through the window,
Go through the wall.
exactly. How else can you get there?
Rook d1.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the whole point is, and this is how you actually use a bit of logic in your game. If I can't do this because they move the knight, they can't move here, right? You just take that. You take this, take your lady. So they were like queen b7, but then, say hi to my little friend. He's coming in. He's coming in hot. So knight e4, but that ain't gonna help you this time. And also notice they can't come infiltrate anymore. That being the big difference. D takes, queen f6, king is in deep trouble. Queen c7, and white to move. And checkmate in 3.
Knight to h6.
Knight h6 check, correct. King to f8.
Queen to h8.
Correct. King has to run.
Knight f5.
And then knight f.
5. Correct. Well done.
We're doing it.
GG, yo, a beautiful, beautiful game. And you may see, just because you sacrifice a pawn for positional pressure, it doesn't mean at the end of the day you won't checkmate your opponent. So I really hope you enjoyed watching this, and we'll be back with some more positional lectures in the future. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching.